Hey guys. So, I know it's been a bit, and I know a lot of people have been worried about me, and rightfully so. I was making a comeback, and then I disappeared again. At least, on YouTube I did. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have a better idea of where I've been. And I have not been stagnant. Far from it, actually. I've been on a bit of a journey over thousands of miles all across the United States. I went back out to the White River Formation on another dig, and I've also been to over 20 natural history museums since you last saw me. In that time, I've met up with old friends, as well as made some new ones. And I've also met some of you, some of my followers. People who were genuinely excited to meet me. Both patrons of the different museums that I've been to, as well as staff and educators there. People working at museums or possibly even pursuing a career in paleontology who told me that I had apparently inspired them to pursue the path that they're on. And that is the highest praise that I have ever received. And I started to really enjoy my time at some of these different museums, showing people the incredible animals from our planet's past. And honestly, I wished that I could share these moments with more of you. I wish that I could show you all these different museums and be your guide. And then, when I was at the Sternberg Museum in Hays, Kansas, I got an idea. What if I just record a little tour of the parts of the museum that really stood out to me, and just nerd out with you all? This isn't going to be replacing my old content. I will still be making more documentaries like I always have. But this is an idea that I think would be a really awesome way for many of you to see some different things that you may never get the opportunity to see. And if my audio sounds a little bit off here, it's because I'm actually still on the road while recording this. I'm literally in my car right now, speaking into a microphone with a blanket on my head. But if you guys like this type of video, please let me know, because I would love to share these kinds of things with you. Who knows, maybe on some occasions, maybe if I encounter followers at a museum, maybe you guys could actually be in a video, or maybe I could interact with other content creators at museums. So comment below, give me some ideas, tell me what you guys would like or not like to see from videos like this. This is kind of an experimental project. This might turn into an entire new series. So sit back and relax, and let me take you on a tour of the Sternberg Museum of Natural History's Armored Animal Hall. Alright guys, I don't normally do stuff like this, but I'm recording this raw, because, I know that I've been kind of MIA for a while, and that I've had some things happening, there's the reasons why. But I've been on a little bit of an adventure for the past month or so, and this is actually the 18th museum that I have been to in the past month. I am at the Sternberg Museum, and again, this isn't my normal type of video, but I'm going to just check this out because honestly, I think out of everywhere that I've been, I may have found my favorite exhibit out of any of the other ones that I've been to. I've been all over the US, and this one really stands out to me. This is the Rise of Armor exhibit. Check this out. First, we're getting into some marine animals. We've got the Dunkleosteus skull, which is the largest armored fish, or placoderm, that we know of. And here, we get into some of the evolution of armor on land, and how much of a convergent evolution masterpiece it is. Because, so here we have Paringtonia, a species of early archosaur. And if you look here, you can see the osteoderms going along its back and even on its limbs. And you don't see osteoderms on the limbs of archosaurs at all in most cases. So this is a completely unique case here. And here we have Scutosaurus, which is a completely separate animal that has very different looking osteoderms, but we can see how this is essentially serving the same purpose and filling the same role of defense in these animals. And I just think it's really, really cool. Here, check this one out. So this is one of the earliest armored dinosaurs, the ancestor to things like the Nodosaurs and the Ankylosaurs. The Scelidosaurus. And here's a direct cast of one of the most famous specimens of these animals from Europe. I've seen this at countless other museums, but never in a display like this with all of this other stuff. And then we get into some of the larger Ankylosaurs. This is Ankylocephalus, which is a large armored dinosaur with a tail club. Not all of the armored dinosaurs had tail clubs. The Nodosaurs didn't, and many of the other Ankylosaurids didn't, and they would have larger spikes along their sides, which formed a different sort of defensive armor. And then here we get into some of my favorites. The Glyptodons, Xenarthrans. And yes, there's a Smilodon perched on top of it, which, you know, we could debate on how likely this would ever happen all day long. But here we see an example of both with and without the armor. So you can see this is what the complete skeleton looks like, but this way you can actually see the skeleton inside. They've got a display here minus the shell. And what I think is really, really cool is now you can see the anchor points, the spots where the armor is really held on by these like keratinous spots that are like super, super dense. And it's like the anchor points to the entire shell that would cover the whole back, like on this individual here. And you can see how well armored even the tail is on these animals. They had a cap on their head of armor. They have this super dense shell all across the back. And then this spiky armored tail going all the way down to the end. Now, this is also an excellent example. Like, this is the excellent example of convergent evolution, in my opinion, because here we've got mammals that essentially evolved very, very similarly in so many ways to the ankylosaurs. But they are, in fact, not dinosaurs. They are mammals. And even so far, more so than just the shell and the armor, we have this. We talked a minute ago about the clubbed tail of certain ankylosaurs. And as it turns out, mammals ended up doing something very, very similar in some cases, like Doedicurus. So, in most cases, this is what you find of the Doedicurus tail club. And it is missing those spikes. And the reason why is because those spikes are not made of bone. They were made of keratin, so it didn't fossilize the same way. Now, I believe that we have a few specimens that show the outline of some of the spikes, which gives us an idea of some of the shape of like how we ended up with that image right there. But you can see all over the knob here of this tail club, you can see these spots where the spikes would have attached. Even though they're obviously lost to time, we still see that there's evidence of its existence. And then this is what we believe it looked like. Like, that's... how is that not taking what ankylosaurs were doing and basically turning it up to 11? Like, look at that thing. I actually kind of want to have a cast made of this and then walk around museums and stuff with that thing slung over my shoulder instead of a Utah raptor skull. And here we've actually got a little bit of artwork showing how they may have been using them, not just as a form of defense against predators to deter animals like that, but also in interspecific competition between possibly rival males, or just in territorial disputes between individuals. And then we get into some of the modern relatives, and also not just modern relatives, because we've got armadillos, which are not descendants of Glyptodons. They're from a different branch of the Xenarthran family tree, but they also had armored shells, but also other types of animals like this hedgehog that also have evolved similar defenses totally independently. And then here we've got a good example of a chunk of Glyptodon shell. So it's a piece of the shell from one of those guys over there. And you can see this is actually a good example of how the armor kind of breaks up. Because, so I've got a few pieces at home that come from the Peace River in Florida. And most of the time, when you find pieces of Glyptodon shell, they're the single little rosette. So you can see the cracks going along the entire thing here. And normally in a river, the individual pieces will fall apart. I have a few that are like 3 or 4 scoots that are all still stuck together, but I don't have anything quite this impressive. I know a few people who have a few decent chunks like about this size, but really, unless you're finding a spot where one was completely buried very quickly, which is exceedingly rare, most of the time, if you're finding Glyptodon material, it's going to come as in the form of a 10,000 piece puzzle. And then here, after checking out some of this stuff, which they get a little bit into the evolution of human armor over the years. And oh my goodness, that is basically a man wearing a crocodilian. Egyptian crocodile armor. That's, I mean, can't knock it. It's a solid choice. But here we have another animal that I have a great deal of love for, the Pampatheres, which is another group of Xenarthrans, also called the giant armadillos, because these are a little bit more similar to actual armadillos in a lot of ways. And here you can actually see, if I walk around this side, they're basically doing the exact same thing as what they were doing over there with the Glyptodons, where they instead of having 2 skeletons, they have a skeleton with half of the shell present. So this is from a species called Holmesina, and you can see the different sizes to the armor as like in different parts of the body. Like you can see across the midsection there, those longer scoots. Those plates allowed for a little bit more flexibility. So that was kind of one of the things that Glyptodons weren't really good at. Their shell was basically a boulder. They were basically walking boulders. But Pampatheres were a little bit more flexible. Their shells were a little bit more malleable, and it allowed them to move a little bit more. But here we can see a good example of the skeleton underneath. So normally the shell would have completely covered the other side, just the same as the side that I just showed you. But this gives us a good view of the skeleton. And then here, remember I was telling you about how the pieces of armor will fall apart, especially like when you're hunting for fossils in the rivers like what you do in Florida. And Pampatheres are another common type of fossil that you can find along with the Glyptodons. And most of the time, when you find Pampathere fossils, just like with Glyptodons, they look kind of like that, where, you know, it's just a single square of armor, just a little piece, because they fall apart nice and solid, but the sections in between just kind of fall apart, and leaving it just to be slowly puzzle pieced back together, or whatever you can do with it. So I just wanted to show you guys, we've got a bunch of different examples of different armored animals. And here, actually, I'm going to close with this. Check this out. So this is the skull of another armored animal that looks a lot like a crocodile. It's actually not a crocodile, though. It's an animal called a Phytosaur. It's a Triassic animal that existed before the crocodiles were the aquatic predators that we know today. And the reason why is because when crocodiles were just starting out, when they looked like this guy over here, these little land crocodiles, like Paringtonia, the Phytosaurs were already filling the role of aquatic ambush predators in the Triassic period. And it wasn't until the Phytosaurs died out at the end of the Triassic period that other crocodiliforms were able to step into that aquatic ambush predator role. So guys, I just wanted to share this with you because honestly, I know that there's been a lot of people worried about me, and I know that it's been kind of slow as far as content uploads, and I don't know how well this is going to do. I just figured I would show this because, like I said, I've been all over the United States, and I have to tell you, this is without a doubt one of my favorite displays. I don't even know if it's my favorite museum, but this is definitely one of my favorite displays on its own, just because you all know how much I love animals like this. The ankylosaurs are some of my favorite dinosaurs. Xenarthrans as a whole are one of my favorite groups of prehistoric mammals. So this was just like a display that was made for me, and I just wanted to share it with all of you. So I hope everybody's doing well. I will be returning home soon. I have to be back home by the 1st, and barring any catastrophic events taking place, I will be back on the grind making content. And I just wanted to drop this here for all of you. And I hope you enjoyed this little tour of this section of the Sternberg Museum. If you've never been here before, I definitely recommend it. And I just wanted to check in with everybody and tell you all thank you for the continued support. So I'll be getting back on the road now. So have a good one, everybody.